Hey guys, it's Liv here. We're bringing you guys a video discussing, since I completely forgot that the DLC doesn't drop until tomorrow, we're doing a video discussing what Ultra Beast I think will be the best one returning in the Crown Tundra DLC. Or at the very least, what I think the best couple are, because I'll go right ahead and say it. The best one is definitely Phoramosa, but I think that there's a lot of contention for the second best Ultra Beast. So when we get to Phoramosa, I'll cover why it's the definitive best, but if you want to stay tuned for my thoughts on second best, I think there's actually several options for that. So yeah, if you guys enjoy, of course, leave a like down below, comment, subscribe if you're new. And with that being said, let's just get right into it. So going into the first Ultra Beast that we have Nihilego. So Nihilego is a poison rock type, of course. In terms of stuff it already had, it was a strong special attacker. It had stuff like T-Spikes, of course. It had rocks. Thunder Wave support was okay. Foul play was okay. But most of it relied on its coverage and stab combination. Stuff like Power Gem, Grass Knot was really cool, especially for ground types that 4 times hit it. And the fact that it outpaces a lot of them. It had Sludge Wave, of course. It had Thunder for stuff like Celesteela. So it had a fair bit going for it, though Nihilego was never like a great option. And I don't think a DLC will necessarily change that. It got a couple of cool options, like Rock Tomb is okay on a lead set, Hex is cool with T-Spikes, but otherwise it didn't really get anything useful besides maybe Meteor Beam with like a Power Herb, or even just Meteor Beam raw if you really want to go for that, because Nihilego does definitely force some switches, and having to double out on Nihilego because of that is pretty cool. I think overall though, Nihilego probably, while a viable Ultra Beast, it's definitely not the best or even like top 3 Ultra Beasts. Next up we got Celesteela. And while this might be surprising to a lot of people, I personally don't think a Celesteela will actually be top 3 this gen. And I think it should be pretty obvious why when we get down the line. But for starters, Celesteela didn't get a ton useful, though I will say that Cosmic Power is kind of useful, and same as Mega Horn, quote unquote, but not really. Grassy Glide and Steel Roller are okay. I think in VGC this is a lot more merit, but I don't think in singles it will be the best or even like up there on Ultra Beast. I think the biggest thing that really takes Celesteela out of contention for top 3 would be some of their other returning mods. Stuff like Coco is going to be ridiculously obnoxious for it. Blaziken's going to be allowed back in OU. That's going to be obnoxious for it. Kieran Black with Bolt Strike is going to dent this, especially in tandem with Coco. So there are definitely a fair bit of mods that'll give this thing a run for its money. And top of stuff that's even already allowed in OU. Stuff like Rotom Heat, for example, is a huge problem for Celesteela, and that's going to be allowed. Volcarona as well will do a fair bit, though I will say that this obviously does get coverage for that with Rock Slide that'll hit substantial. Zeraora will be obnoxious for it. And then also we have Cinderace returning to OU, so I don't think that at the moment at least this will be a very favorable mod, though it's definitely going to be still viable, to say the least. Celesteela though will always be a viable Pokemon, and I fully stand by that. There is no possible meta where this thing won't at least do something in, just because of its obnoxious stout line combination on top of its typing, and just its diversity in sets and move pool. Though it definitely does hurt a bit from the lack of Z, because that does obviously hurt its offensive potential. However, there are still options like Weakness Policy that'll be nice in this Pokemon, so it does have some merit. It'll be a lot better in VGC in my opinion, but I don't think in singles at least it'll be top 3. The only exception to that would be when it comes to draft format, where in draft this will probably be the best one allowed typically, just because the fact that Naga and Pharaoh will obviously be banned. But in terms of standard formats, this probably won't be top 3. It might be, well actually in VGC it probably could be. I don't think it will be in OU at least. And that gets into our next Pokemon, which I actually think will be a top 3. And this is sort of the mod I wanted to build the video around. This is Cortana, obviously, for anyone who is for some reason new to Pokemon, Cortana. Now, Cortana has a lot going for it this generation, actually. And I think that Cortana is probably one of the most underrated going into the DLC Ultra Beasts. We obviously know that Celesteela will be really good. We obviously know that Naga and Phoramosa will be really good. But what about Cortana? So, for one thing, Cortana got Grassy Glide, which is honestly really huge for it. Being able to priority in grassy terrain, which especially in VGC, I think in VGC will be the best Ultra Beast, and I don't think it's contested. Cortana obviously being able to max and set off its own grassy terrain to hit obnoxiously hard off of 181. It has options like Aerial Ace to boost its speed. With Max as well, Cortana's biggest issue right now is the fact of its low damage move pool. Besides Giga Impact and Last Resort, everything else is under base 100. And I guess Guillotine technically, but that's an Oko move, so that doesn't really count. But everything else is substantially low damage. With Max though, these are all ridiculously hard-hitting options, on top of a really good speed set too. This is tying stuff like Durant, which is already a phenomenal Max Pokemon in general. Well, I wouldn't say phenomenal, but it's definitely up there at least. Just because of the fact that Hustle plus Max, obviously Durant will just be viable because of that in general. But Cortana also has another thing going for it, obviously the fact that it has ability to set its own terrain to boost its stats. Durant being a bug steel type can't really boost its stats that way, it has to go for just a superpower. But Cortana being able to go for a terrain on top of also a Knuckle is really, really huge for it, because it can not only boost its own options, but it also has options with stuff like Bulu and Rillaboom to boost its own offenses. So Cortana already has a leg up there, on top of Beast Boost as well, being able to boost stats. So I think Cortana is going to be really filthy in VGC, undeniably the best Ultra Beast in that format in my opinion. In OU, I still think this will be a top 3 mon, or even just singles in general, I think it'll be a top 3 Ultra Beast. In tandem with stuff like Rillaboom to obviously pivot in, and I think Rillaboom actually will potentially get niche and Ubers because of this, and I say that because of potential calcs with a certain Pokemon that actually a lot of VGC players will remember, Assault Vest Cortana. So if we pull up Cortana and we throw an Assault Vest on it, and then we Dynamax that, obviously that's a lot, but let's pull that up versus, let's say, a Water Spout Kyogre, let's say. So I'm dragging the calc onto your screen right now. As you can see, we're gonna actually have to move this over a bit. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna open up another window capture for this. So because I did not think this far ahead, as you can see though, the Water Spout does 81% max from a Modest Kyogre. This is Modest Kyogre 150, so it's at full. So essentially any Scarf Kyogre that wants to go for a Water Spout on this Pokemon can't even kill it because of the Assault Vest. Now without Assault Vest, obviously it's a guaranteed kill. 1 or 3 min, even versus Dynamax. But Assault Vest Cortana, it still gets a ton of damage off of Kyogre, obviously. We need literally like a Rindo Berry to take a hit, and even then, if it wasn't like bulky Rindo Berry, it could still kill. And that's in tandem with obviously like Terrain could be up, and then that's not gonna matter anyway, unless like it gets a really good roll, or just Fizz Death. But even then, there's obviously like a Beast Boost that could happen. Kyogre definitely could never switch in, so Beast Boost getting off beforehand is very, very likely, especially when there's other threats that Cortana can take care of in Ubers, such as Xerneas, for example, which is another huge mod. It outpaces Groudon as well, and it'll do a huge chunk to Groudon too. So I think that this mod actually in Ubers will have such a nice matchup, because the fact that non-Ubers can actually Dynamax, so especially since the fact that Ubers cannot Dynamax, I think this Pokemon will actually be obnoxious in Ubers. Probably one of the more viable, if not the most viable Ultra Beasts in the format. Now, what does that say about OU, though, for Cortana? So I think Cortana will still have a lot of viability in OU. Grassy Glide, as I said, it's going to be huge for it. We see how much Rillaboom and stuff like that is doing right now. And Rillaboom already is a pretty not bad Pokemon in OU. I wouldn't say it's, like, meta-defining or anything. But if we pull up the OU viability rankings, obviously, tier OU, and we go to the viability rankings right now, we can see Rillaboom's rating. And obviously, as we can see, Rillaboom's not like an S rank or an A+ rank, but if we go down, Rillaboom is still one of the better Pokemon in the format right now, just undeniably so. And it does make Pokemon such as Amoonguss really needed, Ferrothorn obviously, but Ferrothorn was really needed beforehand, to be fair. Volcarona, obviously a really good check. If we go down a bit, Rotom Heat is obviously a really good check. So a lot of Pokemon that are really needed. And obviously, some of these Pokemon like Rotom Heat and Volcarona would still be defining anyway. But these Pokemon are still very necessary in checking Rillaboom. Aegislash as well, I know, is a solid Rillaboom check, especially at least to Banded, because it's a nice grass switch. And though, to be fair, Life Orb still definitely can get around it with like SD high horsepower. In general, though, like, especially the Volk and the Rotom Heat are probably some of the best checks, and they're really popular mons still, even with the last DLC. Well, obviously, Volcarona was around in the DLC, but Rotom Heat still is because of stuff like Rillaboom, because of stuff... Well, there's a lot of other reasons, too, but Rotom Heat still is definitely very viable as a check to that. So Cortana, though, I think, especially with just a much more obnoxious attack stat, with, like, a Life Orb SD spread, or, like, a Banded Cortana, or even just Scarf Cortana, just to fake out potential grassy terrain sets, and even then, still going for like a Leaf Blade in terrain is still going to be obnoxious on a Scarf set. So I think Cortana will actually be really obnoxious. Probably more viable than Steelite, in my opinion. I don't think it'll be more viable than Naga, though I think it will at least give it contention, and it's definitely not going to be more viable, at least in OU, than Phoramosa, though in VGC I think this will be the best one. I think this could also be the best one in Ubers too, potentially, but I don't think it will be in OU. I think that's purely just because of the fact that Dynamax isn't allowed. If it was, this would undeniably be the best one in OU, in my opinion, and I don't think it could be contested. Next up is Zerkatry. I think this one in VGC could be cool. Rising Voltage obviously is really cool on it. It has an okay speed, especially with Tailwind teams being really common right now, and Zerkatry being a not bad option on Tailwind teams. And also Airstream partners with this as well could be cool. So I think Zerkatry has some niche. I don't think it will be an unviable Pokemon. It'll probably be a bit more viable than it was last generation, to be honest. But I don't think it'll be much more. It won't be enough to really justify this being like a top meta threat or anything. It'll be a decent one. Like, I could say that this would at least be like a viable one, but I wouldn't say it's like gonna be like meta defining or like a Pokemon with like even like 5% usage or anything on average. It'll probably be like over like at the 2 or 3%, similar to how it was, but I think it'll be just a slight bit better because of stuff like Rising Voltage, of course, that this will get. So, I mean, other than that, Zerkatry didn't really get anything else. It got like Electro Ball and Endure and then Rising Voltage, but that's really it. So nothing that really like shapes Zerkatry, I guess, besides like an Endure Salix that could be cool. But other than that, not really anything. Guzzlord, the only things I'm really going to give Guzzlord are Body Press, High Horsepower, and Heat Crash. Other than that, like Steel Roller, quote unquote, but not really. Just because it does need Train Up, of course, and it's not going to usually have that. Also, even though this Pokemon is pretty fat, I don't think this will really gain a ton from Dynamax, just because Dynamax does benefit Pokemon a lot more that have really high defenses and low HP than Pokemon that have really high HP and low defenses. So, I think that this will obviously be a bit hurt necessarily. Well, it won't be like bad, but it'll be definitely a bit more hurt than compared to something like Steelix that could just gain a lot more. Even just if you put them as the same typing, just has stat line benefits a lot more from Max. The Guzzlord will be like okay. This is definitely the worst Ultra Beast though, and I think it's not even close. I'm not gonna dealt an actually good Ultra Beast. I think in OU this will give Cortana a run for its money. I think it'll be a bit better. I think the biggest thing for Cortana, and this truthfully might just be me overhyping it, is just the fact that obviously priority is really nice, and even if we pull up like a Bandit Cortana versus something like a Noggin Adele. So a Bandit Cortana in terrain going for so Choice Band going for Grassy Glide does around 32 to 37. And while that's not a ton, for a 4 times resist, you would really think that would do more. You'd think that would do less. And obviously if we make it Adamant, then now after a spike, let's say, it's a guaranteed 3 KO. So, I mean, while it's nothing insane, obviously Scarf Cortana can still get around it. Naga's probably not going to usually run Scarf, it'll just bank off a speed boost. Not anything insane, but it's still the fact that it can do that. And also, it 2 KOs Pheromosa, surprisingly. I remember doing a test game with my good pal Ogobina, and outside of terrain, it does, like, absurd amount of damage. That's obviously banded, to be fair. If we made this even, like, Jolly and, like, a Life Orb variant in terrain, it's gonna nearly kill. And that's versus not a minus Fizz Def set, that's versus Naive, so it's minus Spidef. So just gets to show that, I mean, this will be obnoxious, just damage-wise. It'll be so good. Oops, wrong window. Okay, so I think that Naga Adele will definitely be up there. I don't think Naga will be bad by any means. It'll still probably be better than Cortana, but I think that Cortana is a lot closer to it than something like Seala at least is this gen. But we'll have to see. Maybe the meta defines in a way where stuff like Buzzwole and Pheromosa make grassy terrain unviable, or at least less viable, because I don't think it will ever truly be unviable just because of how good Grassy Glide is. But we do get some nice options back, actually, in stuff like Buzzwole, for example. So one of the biggest things that I think that Buzzwole has going for it is it currently does a very good job at walling current Rillabooms, at least. Bulu obviously gets player off, so it won't wall that if Bulu becomes the dominant terrain setter, though I think that Rillaboom might still hold a nice niche because it can U-turn out. So in terms of getting around Buzzwole, we're going to need to look into stuff like Grassy Seed acrobatic stats if Rillaboom actually wants to do the job. Or even then, for example, versus Buzzwole, if we throw on like an Aerial Ace on a Life Orb variant, we're not even killing. So as I said, we're going to probably need something a bit stronger than that, of course. This is versus Fizdep Buzzwole, to be fair, but I think that'll probably be the common set if it is run at all. The other will say that Buzzwole did at least last gen have some really, really solid viability early meta before people like really figured out how to beat it. So I could totally see that repeating again. And there are a lot of Pokemon, like alone, Marowak seemed to repeat when it came back as a really viable Pokemon for like a couple weeks. So I could totally see that being Buzzwole again. But we'll have to see what happens. I do think, though, that this has a bit more viability than it did last gen just as a terrain check, specifically for Rillaboom terrain, which is why I'm running Bulu on most of my teams, unless it's Anubers. Now we're going to get into the obvious best choice, at least for OU. I don't think this will be the best choice in Ubers, actually, and I'll get into that in a bit, but I do think in OU this will be the best choice, being Pheromosa. Now, Pheromosa has a lot going for this gen. For one, boots are pretty nice on it just to get around potential webs, which webs were a solid way around it at least last gen. Then we're going to definitively get around it, but at least they do definitely help, to say the least. Especially when you're talking about such a fast Pokemon like Pheromosa with 151 speed, that is as frail as it is. I think that'll be obviously really nice for it. However, Life Orb will obviously still be really good. Choice sets will still be, like, okay at best. Scarf especially, but there's no real reason to run Scarf anymore, because Scarf was, honestly, its biggest reason was probably just to beat Web's teams. Though, obviously, there was niche merit, quote-unquote, depending on the team. This thing has some solid mixed coverage. You can usually just run like Ice Beam plus Fighting Move plus U-Turn and then get a lot out of that 4th slot depending on what your team needs. Rapid Spin's pretty cool on this Pokemon, especially with the speed boost now. Just really, really nice to get around potential Scarfers because you're basically invalidating them. Quiver Knight's is pretty cool, though I think Rapid Spin will just take over just because of the speed boost and also boots on top of that, because now you're getting around speed, you're getting around Scarfers while also not worrying about hazards. and just in general being a nice utility mon in that regard. So I think Pharaoh will actually be a lot better of a spinner this gen than it was last gen. And I also think that Quiver will be a lot more outshined, though I do think that Quiver does still have some nice merit to it. Pharaoh still has a really good special move pool. I think the coverage it needs is a lot more physically based, so I don't think it will necessarily be able to do that. However, Pharaoh is still really obnoxious. I'm personally running Talonflame on a couple teams just to get around this Pokemon, and also Lucha on like 3 others just to get around this, because that way then I have a nice out, assuming it's not speed boosted already. So we'll have to see what happens. I do think this will at least be a really top tier Pokemon. It'll probably get banned in OU within a couple weeks. Easily the best Ultra Beast in my opinion, though Naga is like the next closest thing Cortana in my opinion right after that, at least for OU. However, because of the fact that this will probably be an Ubers Pokemon, and I know that Ubers is really weird with the Dynamax rules, but for the most part, Ubers can't Dynamax. There are a couple though, like Kieran Black. But assuming this can't Dynamax, I definitely think that this will be objectively worse than Cortana in Ubers. If it can Dynamax, I think it's to be decided, though I personally do still favor Cortana a bit, just because of the fact that it does, like Cortana's biggest weakness, as I mentioned, was the fact that it can't hit with as hard of a move pool. But imagine Cortana's 181 attack stat off of like a 130, 140 base attack move. I think that Cortana as well, with its typing, it just benefits to killing a lot of other top tier threats more so. Whereas fighting isn't going to get past Xerneas, and Bug isn't going to do nearly as much versus something like a Kyogre. Now, Pharaoh will still hit obnoxiously hard, and I think it will still be a very good Dynamax if it's allowed in Ubers, though I think that Cortana will just outshine it, truthfully. Unless if Rillaboom becomes insanely inviable, though I could not see a metagame with Kyogre returning, especially if Primals don't return. If Primals don't return, I feel very confident in saying this. If they do return, a little bit different, because Primal Kyogre does obviously have the check in sending in your Primal Groudon and stopping it from clicking water moves, but I will say though, in a Kyogre meta at all, Primal or not, I cannot see a meta where Rillaboom isn't at least a niche viable Pokemon and Cortana at least is not a viable Pokemon, especially with Max. So I do think that will outshine Pharaoh. Pharaoh was never like any insane Uber to begin with. I don't think that Dynamax will fix that. So yeah, VGC also, this was like an okay Pokemon at best. Next we get into Cephalon. Now, looking at Cephalon actually also got a lot going for it. For one, Scorching Sand is really cool because now it's not doing a ton to T-Tar anyway, at the very least, it's not going to be passive versus it because it can always go for stuff like burns. As well as not having to worry about Pursuit is actually really huge for this spawn. Another big benefit is not having to worry about hazards either with heavy-duty boots, though I will say that I think that lefties will still probably be the best set with like a sub-combine variant, though boots are still really nice in this. It also got some nice physical options, stuff like Shadow Claw, for example, is really, really nice, especially with this 127 attack stat. Nothing insane, obviously, because special is still a fair bit higher, though this does give merit to running mixed or even just fully physical variants, depending on the team you need. It does still not get any good fire physical coverage, if I'm not mistaken. However, at the very least, I mean, a mono ghost set, oh, you know, it gets Fire Punch. Okay, so it actually does have some nice stuff. Flame Charge is still not bad on it anyway, at least for physical, though, again, Fire Punch would probably be a lot better. So I do, oh, you know what, this already had Shadow Claw. I don't know why Shadow Claw is listed, but Fire Punch is still really cool on this option, to be honest. And Knockoff as well is kind of cool. So it does have at least an okay physical move pool. Rock Blast is nice coverage, at least for opposing fires, so it can still hit them. Especially stuff like Volcarona as well on a Scarf variant. Rock Blast can actually be really cool on. So it does have some nice options, though I think that obviously special will still reign supreme. Boots will help a ton with this Pokemon, on top of also not having to worry about Pursuit. As well, Ghosts just seem to be a lot better this generation in OU just because of what's allowed. Now, we do not get a lot of good Dark types coming back, at least for OU if I'm not mistaken. So, as well, I don't think that a ton is going to change in terms of that regard. The Ghosts are still going to be really good. I can definitely see this being a lot better than it was last gen. I don't know if it will be really good though, because of stuff like Zygarde still being in the meta and Land of T coming back. So stuff like that coming back down, as well as Lando I just being an objectively better special breaker. I think this will still be a not bad Pokemon. I think by the time the Ubers get cleared out, this could still be a really good Pokemon actually. However, I don't think it will be better than stuff like Cortana or Celesteela, though it will be a lot better than it was last gen to say the least. And finally, Stakataka. Now, Stakataka has one use and it's on Trick Room. Trick Room is very niche in OU. It's literally seldom to none. And I think that without Z, this is a lot worse, as well as in VGC. And I think, again, similar things. Well, it's a lot more common in VGC. I don't think it's really going to be as viable on VGC because, well, it does still hit obnoxiously hard. And Body Press is still really cool on this. I think that without the Z just nabbing a guarantee kill, it's going to definitely hurt this Pokemon a lot. As well as just the fact that a lot of Pokemon in Trick Room, such as Rhyperior, for example, just take advantage of the Trick Room a lot better. As well as Dynamax. Though this could be a not bad weakness policy option. I definitely think it will have niche well, I think that Niche might be a bit underselling it, to be fair. I think this will be an okay Pokemon, but I think Rhyperior will just be objectively better as a rock type in Trick Room. But we'll have to see what happens. This definitely does have some nice things going for it, such as the much lower speed. It's one of the slowest Pokemon that actually has a good stat line. In fact, I think it actually is the slowest, besides maybe Shuckle, that has like remotely competent stat line. Yeah, so the only slower Pokemon than this would be like, oh, you know what? This is, let me set this to Natdex, because that way then we can actually see the full list of slower Pokemon. So the only slower Pokemon that are actually, yeah, nothing here. The most viable one being Trapinch and Shuckle would be the only two slower. I guess Pikamuku kind of, but otherwise like Ferroseed, and Ferroseed really isn't going to be mattering in VGC anyway. Trapinch even then was like on one team if I remember correctly, and I just remember seeing it around. Shuckle isn't really viable in VGC. Pikamuku is like viable, quote unquote, but like as a really gimmick mon. Again, though, no one's really running Shuckle or Pikamuku. Trapinch was running like one team. I don't see this thing really getting underpaced by anything that would actually be competent. People might run Trapinch, I guess, like just for it. But again, I don't even think the Trapinch would kill just because the obnoxious Fizz Death, as well as the Max as well. This will probably take the hit. And again, that could be beneficial for policy at least. But I still see this thing being like maybe like a middle ground niche option is best than a low niche option. OU, it's gonna be like on one team, and it's gonna be like a standard Trick Room team, and that's really it, if at all. So yeah, I think that obviously the best option will be Phoramosa. I think it's pretty uncontested, though I think the second best slot goes to, at least overall, I think Cortana actually has the most potential in more formats. So if we're going on an OU standard, Phoramosa would be the best, then Naga, then Cortana. Though overall, Cortana probably has the most purpose in my opinion. And feel free to disagree with me in the comments down below. I would love to debate you guys on this. I think that Cortana probably has the most potential, though, coming into Sword and Shield, at least based on more formats than just OU. If we're going strictly off OU, I still think it'll be really good, but I don't think it'll be the best one. Same as in Draft. I think Celesteal will outshine it in Draft just because Draft is a lot more... It's a lot easier to build around a mod like Celesteal than it is Cortana, just because of the diverse stat line, and then Pharaoh and Naga usually aren't allowed in Draft anyway, though even in Ubers, they'll just be objectively better. So it really just depends on the format, though I think there are more formats that Cortana benefits from as well. Even stuff like the Battle Spot singles, I think that Cortana benefits a ton from. So yeah, we'll just have to see what happens. Hopefully you guys enjoyed, and we'll see you guys in tomorrow's video. Peace out, guys.